This is DevOps in Agile Way podcast.
Hello everyone. So after I think 5 episodes or even 6 where I talked about columns and explain every single letter, today I have the guest again, finally, for some of you. I'm really happy to introduce to you Luca Mezzalira, who is the Serverless Architect in AWS. May I say that in this way? Because you are architect, right, in serverless area, let's say it this way. So thank you very much, Luca, for joining me today and accepting my invitation. I really expect to learn a lot from you, from your experience. I believe we will have like a very interesting discussion today because your experience, your presence is really great, and I was looking forward to have you in my show.
Oh, thank you very much, Pawel. It's a pleasure being here, and I'm looking forward to our discussions.
Right, perfect. Thank you. So first question, I promised you some kind of strange question. I found when I looked on your experience, etc., I found something what today we can find a little bit, let's say, embarrassing. So you were a Flash developer on the beginning of your career, right? So of course, we have some opinion about Flash today, right? So how it come that you started with Flash?
That's a good question. So I started when I was 17 because I was working. I'm a self-taught, so I was working in a warehouse when I was 16, and at 17 a colleague of mine told me, "Have you ever seen these things?" And he showed me like HTML4. I thought that's very interesting, super cool. So you write some code and something visualized in the computer. It's amazing. And they give me this 500 pages book on HTML4, the most boring book that I ever seen in my life. But I basically smash it in 1 week. And usually I wasn't, let's say, a avid reader. I'm not, let's say, really good on. Still today, I'm reading only tech books. That's the only thing that triggers me. All the rest, romance or other things, crime books and stuff like that, I don't read them. So after HTML4, back in the days, Flash was another big thing.
Yeah.
And JavaScript definitely wasn't. And very often there are some people thinking that Flash was a mistake or was slow, it was painful, and so on and so forth. The reality is, as everything, depends how you use it because it's just a tool. And I can give you a couple of examples that are quite interesting. When I usually share them, people start to say, okay, so probably it wasn't that bad. I started to use, so first of all, the productivity that Flash and the Flash ecosystem with Flex Air, when was acquired by Adobe, started to provide was insane. Because I remember with 2-3 people, we were able to do multiplayer games and very complex for large brands and that will handle thousands of people in the same game using Flash Media Server, using at some point 3D GPU acceleration, stuff like that. And it was like a really tiny team that the tool make us extremely productive because we didn't have the problem of fragmentation of platform. Everything was running in the Flash player or in Adobe Air that was using the Flash player. And therefore, we could tweak our code for mobile, desktop, and web very easily. It was very close to the idea of write once, deploy everywhere. It wasn't, let's say, obviously there, but okay. And the other cool thing I can tell you that, for instance, one challenge that I had, and I think it was 2009, they asked me to do, let's say, to use Flash on a motorbike to replace the mechanical dashboard with a digital one. So in 2009, as you can imagine, there weren't, let's say, too many technologies for creating amazing and rich experiences for the users. There was Qt. That was one that we evaluated. But Qt, first of all, there weren't many developers. And secondly, it was way clunkier compared to Flash. So what I did, and that was like a proof of concept for a large motorbike companies in Italy that is known worldwide. And we had like, I remember in 2009, there was the first Centrino board. There was the Intel board. The first board was like big like my hand that contains 2 processors. That was like mind-blowing. You have both of them, and it was like so tiny. And we basically installed that in the motorbike. And we were able to plug it into the engine. So we were able to get like RPM, speed, gears, and so on. So all the stuff related to the motorbike. And through a C daemon, so a daemon written in C, we had like a strong SLA that was communicating with the interface and showing when someone was obviously driving the motorbike, all the metrics almost near real time. So the SLA was under 14 milliseconds. So we were able to stay under 10. We use a UDP socket back in the days. And we were just firing events every millisecond for sending information to the UI. Also, if some package dropped, it wasn't a problem because it wasn't a big deal. But the thing was working like a charm. And even that, for instance, allowed me to go to Adobe in France and Adobe in San Francisco, because they were doing something similar for cars, but with flashlight. That was a technology for mobile. But it wasn't performing like the prototype that I made with a Gen 2 distribution that was modified for having the libraries of Ubuntu, the graphic libraries for Ubuntu for running Adobe Air. And I completely blow their mind, because they were the engineers, stuff like that. How can you do that? And then I showed all the things, and that was one thing that was amazing. And the another very interesting project was one thing that Adobe told me it would never happen. So it's impossible that a team of 5 people would be able to deliver this. And it was a reverse engineering of InDesign. Because InDesign has a format called IDML that is an XML format. It's basically like the vast majority of the applications on desktop, they just create like a sort of zip, but with a different extension, and off you go. So we were doing a reverse engineering of InDesign. So from using InDesign, let's say authoring, from the authoring space, you can just tag certain elements. And we were replicating into a Flash interface exactly the same thing that then will be repackaged through InDesign server and sent to, let's say, printers for print 300 DPI or high quality catalogs for big organization, that Swedish organization. And I stop here, just I give you your mind to think which organization it is that you can build, let's say, furnitures. So that's very, very
I need to think about this. Which company is that?
Yes. And those are few of the things that we were doing with Flash. But I believe the problem is, as usual, there is this misconception that the tool might be slow, whatever. But I think it's more the capability of the developers and how you interpret the language, because you can do very slow code also with C or Rust or whatever. It depends how you handle that, right? But if you are a capable developer, you know what you're doing, it's very likely that also high-level languages could work in low-end devices.
Yeah, that's a perfect, summary, because this is always, I said this always, it's not about the tool, it's about the use and how you approach to this, how you approach to the problem, how you approach to the solution, how you do things. So looks like Flash was good enough to have it as almost embedded in automotive industry, like 15 years ago. So come on, right? And this, what you said about proper implementation, proper approach to things, leads me to the more light topic for the first episode of our interview, because you are not only the architect, you also have a lot of experience with community. You are author, you created a lot of presentation stuff to, let me say this, teach people how to do things. I strongly believe this is like a heart of DevOps, and not only DevOps, but IT industry at all, because all right, maybe someone will be very unhappy with what I say, but today we think about speed, not necessarily about the quality, not necessarily about doing things right. We will come to this a little bit in the second episode. But I think that big responsibility of the community is to present the good approaches, present the good practices, present the good cases, and also bad cases where you should do things in that way or different way. So how you deal with communities, because you do a lot of stuff for the communities today. So what is your approach here?
Yeah, totally. So probably it's my experience that I had with the community back in the day. So I started to be, let's say, a professional developer or working in this industry 20 years ago. And back in the days, there wasn't like Facebook or the other things. It was like the community was on a forum, and you need to do a lot of meetups to meet people. And I travel around Italy because back in the days I was living there, and I was part of this community. Was ActionScript.it. That was one of the community on ActionScript in Italy. I think it was the third largest in Europe.
Mhm.
And what I've learned is that because I was self-taught, is that community helped me a lot on I don't know, drill down on specific topics, pushing my boundaries, teaching me how to do certain things. And since then, I always had this idea that if it wasn't for the community, probably I wouldn't be here today. And I always say I have this forever debt with the community. And in the past 10 years, since when I moved to UK, I realized that I had also back in the days in Italy, I was contributing a lot, but I think that I completely changed gear when I moved to UK, because I realized how lucky I am to be exposed to specific projects and challenges that are not happening to everyone every day. And I have this strong sense of community. Therefore, what I try to do is trying to take, let's say, complex things that I've learned during my time that maybe took me months for learning, and now untangle them for the community. I think, let's say, in several cases, many people are surprised that despite working for AWS or before I was VP of architecture, I was contributing so much from code-wise or architecture-wise, stuff like that. But the reality is, I feel that is important because somewhere out there is another Luca that is looking for that guidance and that specific things that might come from me or from other people. It doesn't matter, but I want to think that there are people that might be inspired what I'm doing, and might be and that the topic that I'm sharing are useful for them and for their organization, and therefore I tend always to think, and I became better, to be honest, over the years, and more structured to create content and figure out what could be the next thing that I could explain. That is, first of all, is a passion of mine, and secondly, that could help other people to achieve better outcomes. And I think that, as you said, the community has these, and I get that not everyone feels comfortable with that because maybe they never contribute to the community or stuff like that. But the reality is, despite your level of knowledge, what I encourage everyone to do is making a contribution, because the reality is there is somewhere someone that is looking exactly of the challenge that you faced. And if you are sharing that, first of all, it helps you to rationalize better your learnings. And secondly, it helps the other person to maybe cut short certain challenges, and instead of spending weeks banging their head on the wall, they might have, let's say, a solution that in hours they can put in place. Therefore, I don't think there is a shortage of, let's say, knowledge or possibilities out there. I really hope that people feel comfortable to share the community, because maybe the first contribution won't be great, but this, as everything, is a learning curve, right? So the more you do them, and the better you become. And therefore, I remember I started to do my first public talks. It was like 25, so 2005. And today, let's say I have done like over 300 public talks worldwide, from Japan to Silicon Valley. And therefore, that was, and I can guarantee you, till a few years ago, let's say, yes, it was good, but it wasn't great. And I always try to rationalize what I could do better, and trying to improve, because that's a mindset that is let's say, coming with me since the past 20 years. But the reality is, the more you do, the more experience you gain, the better you will become. Otherwise, it's difficult to say, oh, I want to be a speaker, but I don't want to do talks. So you need to start.
Yeah, it's like if you are the football player, or for the American part of the audience, soccer player, you cannot just go to the field and be like another Messi, Ronaldo, Lewandowski, whatever else, right? You need years of experience and a little bit luck. And this, what you said, resonates with me very much for two things. First of all, is this learning curve and how how we should do things, right? So first, learn, do, teach. This is the best way to establish the proper knowledge for yourself even, right? So this is also the learning, even if you teach, this is the learning process for yourself. And the second part is you touch the topic which I already spoke with Victor Vedmich, also the AWS guy, developer advocate. Our paths crossed many times in the past. We worked together for EPAM.
Okay.
Now we are friends. And he said exactly this. It is not about the level of the knowledge. It's about the willing of sharing. Right? Because there is always someone, as you said, who is looking for this knowledge. And my approach is here like to give to people something what I wanted to see in my past, to help me be somewhere else than I was at that point. How do you think? Because this may sound strange for many people, right? So you are not experienced, you are maybe even on junior position, but we say go to the stage, small, big, doesn't matter, and share your experience. How to do that?
Yeah, it's a tricky one, right? Very often, one thing that I'm asked is, okay, let's assume that they have something to say. Let's put it that way. How can I find the stage? And I think, nowadays is easier than ever because you can have virtual stages and you can have physical stages. So when I moved to London a few years ago, before pandemic, I was running a JavaScript community that I started because there was a strong React community in London, a strong Angular community in London, but no one was talking about JavaScript. I said, okay, well, why not? I mean, worst case scenario, that would be me and 10 people, and I would meet these 10 people. That is nice, always meeting people, and that's it. Turned out 2 years later that it became the largest community in Europe. So the thing is, in that community, what I was looking for obviously experienced speakers. That's fine. I had the pleasure to have quite very well-known speaker in the JavaScript world, but also I encouraged people that were coming there listening to also speak. Because very often I was talking with the attendees and would say, okay, what do you do? Where do you work? What are your interests? What is your passion? And very often I had people were coming from listening to a talk, and then a few months later they were invited to do a talk. And for me, the learning part there is very interesting, because if you are going to meetups, I can guarantee you that every single meetup organizer is looking for someone to talk at some point, because maybe they have a short list of speakers, but because everything is for free, why not do that? Secondly, you can do that virtually. Nowadays, we have so many media that we can leverage for this. And also, if you are based, I don't know, in Italy or Greece or other parts where maybe the meetup culture is not as big as in London or UK, you can definitely reach these, let's say, these people and maybe organize a remote talk. That is absolutely something that many meetups are doing. The third thing is, yes, bear in mind that you can always organize inside your company. Maybe you won't reach a big crowd, but the reality is it doesn't matter the number of people. What it matters is the experience that you are. Also, if you are, let's say, my mindset is usually also if there is just one person that picks one small thing from my talk, perfect. So I reach my goal. Because the reality is not the fact that you go on a keynote of the largest conference in the world, and that is the final goal. That doesn't matter. That if it has to come, it will come. What it matters is that you are forced on your stuff to rationalize what you need to say, first of all, and that will create a solid mental model in your brain. And the solid mental model won't leave you no matter what. And you start to have more connections. And that for me is extremely helpful for the speakers and extremely helpful for the people that sees a different angle. Because remember that when you are describing how you have done something that for you now, it might seem obvious because you pass through different stages. Like, I have a problem and then I need to solve this problem. This is in my context. And then I solve this problem using the tools that are available in my context. And off you go, you provide the solution that provides benefit or not. It doesn't matter. As you said, it could be also like a bad story and it's still interesting. But the other people that are listening to you has a different context, might come from a different background. And therefore, what you are saying that might seem the most obvious things in the world for you, it might be high opening for them. And therefore, for me, is it doesn't matter how big is the crowd. I'm still doing, after 300 talks worldwide, meetups or session inside internal session in my company and stuff like that, because I see the value. There is another big perk of doing meetups, that you can engage way better with the audience compared to a conference. Very often, after or before the meetup, there is the networking part, and you eat some pizza that might be, let's say, similar to the Italian pizza, but very often is not if you're not in Italy.
Hawaiian one, right?
And basically there you receive feedback from people, you receive questions from people. And just to give you an idea, when I was writing my second book, the problem is that the topic wasn't very well explored. There was Micro-Frontends, for people that don't know about that. And what I did, and I used to define to my friends, that was a community book, in terms that in order to understand what kind of problems people would face embracing Micro-Frontends back in the days, because I was starting to talk about them in 2018. So it's a bit of a few years that I'm talking about them. And what I did, I started to collect all the questions that I was receiving in every talk. And since then, I tried to rationalize the most common one, and then I put them in the book. Because I had an idea, but my perspective was contaminated, if you want. Because for me, certain things were given for granted. For people, they weren't. And more they were asking about that, the more I understand what I need to talk about, the better quality the book was becoming. So for me, it's there are so many great things that are happening when you do, let's say, public speaking, despite there isn't a big crowd. And the other thing is networking. You never know what you will be dragged into when you start to broaden your network, because very often it's because I started to have, let's say, certain collaboration or discussion with people that I never met, maybe, or they have seen a video on my talks on YouTube, and was a fantastic experience. I never turned down these kind of opportunities for helping the community wherever it is, because what you can gain in a discussion or an initial collaboration that maybe in a few years will become something more is invaluable. So there are so many perks to, let's say, just do a public talk on a meetup or inside your organization that very often people are not thinking about. But the reality is, I understood that it's not just the sharing and the fact that you became a better public speaker, but it's also all the rest that is coming with this activity that very, very often people are not thinking about. But for me, it's now common that I go out with the speakers when I see them in another conference, and we start to, having a dinner together, breakfast. We chat about what they are experiencing, what's not. They give me, let's say, some hints on, I've seen these things, why you don't do in this way. So there are so many things that are happening and so many feedback that you can receive for improving yourself, that I know that there could be, let's say, not intimidating at the beginning doing, let's say, public talks, but the reality is no one is I'm nervous when I go to a stage that people says, well, it's impossible, but I am. And it's normal, because if you are not, you probably deliver not a great talk. If you are too relaxed on a stage, it's very likely that you won't be able to do the best that you can. If you are still nervous after 300 talks, it means that it matters for you. It means that you're going there and you will do the best that you can. And yes, there will be some improvements, but surprise, surprise, after 300 talks, I'm still looking for improvements, because there are some things that I'm screwing up on the stage, and I try to hide them as better as I can, but it's not always possible. And I realize from that. So for me, it's a long, let's say, answer, but I believe that the importance is that we try to understand that it's not just a public talk, and we shouldn't be intimidated on doing that, because someone will benefit from that.
Yeah, that's a great answer. So it was not long, really, because at least well, time is relative. So for me, it was it was great listening, really. So thank you for this answer. And you touch a very interesting point of the remote meetups, right? Because I'm jumping a little bit, so I'm shortened the road of the speaker, let's say. With meetups, conferences, Of course, there is a different dynamics between speaker and audience, but there is a dynamic, right? Because you look on the people are looking on you, you see how they react. My approach to talks is maybe a little bit strange, but when I see that people are not really buying or understanding what I'm saying, I'm changing a little bit the direction where I go. It's tricky. It not always works as I would like to, but still, with remote, the problem is that you do not see the audience, you do not see how they react, you do not see if they listen to you or just having the meetup open and that's it. So there are ways to make this experience a little bit more easy for speaker. For example, I've got on my camera, I got this like a eyes, put. So I'm speaking to someone. From your experience, what difference and how you overcome this difference for the remote talks?
Yeah, I think is an interesting question. So I heard several people that are trying to visualize someone while they were talking to a camera. For me, it was never a problem. I don't know why, but I'm quite comfortable talking to just a monitor and I don't see anyone. But it's a personal, right? Mm-hmm. So usually, what I do is I change the way I communicate when I do online talks. Because the body language is extremely important for a speaker. The fact that you can emphasize with just, let's say, I don't know, a hand that for Italian is quite common when you are saying something specific or whatever. It's very powerful. With the fact that you can move into the stage, go in front of the audience and just emphasize there is extremely powerful. You cannot when you are doing virtual talks. But you can add, let's say, some breaks. And what you need to learn there is the art of pauses. So when you are talking, there are different ways that you can emphasize. Usually in public talks in person, I tend to cover a lot of ground, and I'm not the classic speaker where there are many speakers that are fantastic and that I cannot definitely do that. That they add a lot of mimi and all the jokes inside it. I honestly, I tried, I failed miserably, and I said, okay, no, it's not something that I'm capable to. But that could be one thing. But the other thing is the art of pauses. So for me, is important that in order to emphasize something, you can leverage pauses because they're extremely powerful. So if you are, for instance, saying a powerful sentence that for you are the key things for what you need to say, and then you pause after, that silence of few seconds, it doesn't have to be 30 seconds, but like few seconds, that create an emphasis that is tremendous. Why that? Because while you are talking, the attendees are listening and they need to understand what you're saying, because for you it's crystal clear in your mind, but for them it's brand new content. The pause allow them to catch up with their train of thoughts and then suddenly click. And that click is the way how you are basically emphasizing things, because they immediately get to the point if it was crystal clear what you were describing very often. And as you can see, the simplicity of doing this kind of technique that works perfectly, by the way, on virtual session or virtual public talks is incredible because it's simple, it's super effective, and people understand. It's obvious that if you tend to, let's say, provide exactly the same intonation, the same importance to all the talk, nothing is important, because the attendees has to understand what is the part that could matter for them. But if you do the effort during the rehearsal phase to say, okay, this is one thing that they need to capture. And sometimes you can do with hooks. Very often another trick is not talking about you, but talking about what they are gaining. The beginning, one of the trick that I learned in several training that I had from Adobe, AWS, etc., is you need to have a strong hook at the beginning where you explain what is in there in your talk for the audience. If you start saying, I don't know, this is the problem space that I have. So I don't know, the complexity of microservices lies on the communication structure of your organization. That's quite a bold statement. And then and then you can continue the introduction. You probably experience that you have to, let's say, you want to work independently, but at some point you need to work with other teams. You start to have these clashes that basically slow down the development of things. So your problem space, you immediately give them the problem space that is something tangible, something that that maybe not everyone, but vast majority of the people have experience. And then you say, and during this talk, we are going to find 3 techniques where we are going to explain how to overcome those. So you are immediately hook them. And that is, let's say, a super strong opening. And then when you are structuring your talk, that is especially for virtual, is very likely, as you said, that people turn off their mind. Okay, so they maybe, I don't know, they receive a tweet or they receive a notification, whatever. Usually what you structure your talk and what I call like the flexible slides, you create, let's say, some different chapters, so area of your talk that are short enough to say, I want to describe in the first part this, in the second part that. And then slowly but steady, you are allowing people to jump off and into your talk because you have this chapter. Maybe some chapter they don't care because they believe that they already know enough for that part. And maybe they care more when you move to another thing. And that basically impacts your delivery because you are forced to, let's say, stop and start a new chapter. And that will emphasize, let's say, to immediately switch gear and move into a new topic. So those are some of many tricks that usually you can use as a speaker for recreating the engagement and bring them back into what you are saying.
That's perfect. Thank you very much for sharing these tips, because this is very important. To keep the attention of people is tricky part and not that easy.
No.
So the time is flying very fast. Time is very relative. Unfortunately, we need to finish the first part of our interview right now. I have like 1,000 more questions about these topics, but we can summarize this part very simply. Is not the matter how experienced you are. It's the matter of your will to share, finding the proper space to share, and do it naturally. Do it as you. And I think with that bombshell, we can finish this episode. Thank you very much, Luca, for joining me here, and see you next week.
Thank you for listening to this episode of DevOps in Agile Way podcast with your host, Pawel. Subscribe, comment, and do not forget to check our next episodes. Stay tuned. Stay safe. Stay curious.